Great. We're on. All right, so nice to see you, everyone. I've just got a couple of questions just to sort of see who's in the room, if that's okay. I'd love to know who here works in property management? Wow, okay, like 75, 80%. Very good. Who in the room is either a business owner, a department head, or leads a team? All right, so lots of people are going to find what I've got to talk about today very relevant. And if you didn't put your hand up, I can promise you that because you are at a commercial real estate seminar, that what I've got to share with you today is still relevant for you. So our agenda today is I've got three things that I want to talk about. The first thing is there are three functions that exist in any profit-seeking business. They exist in all businesses, but they exist slightly differently in a commercial real estate business. So we're going to unpack what those are. And then once we've identified what those three functions are, I want to talk about how can we structure a team to make sure that a business is set up to adequately perform those three functions. And finally, I want to talk about the growth levers that exist if you want to activate more growth in a commercial real estate business. And given the skew of the audience, which is predominantly property management, we'll focus in on growing a property management business. And for those of you who learn through, shapes and diagrams, I'm going to help you out by using different shapes for each of these sections. So there are three functions in a business, so we'll use triangles for that. Team structure is really like org charts, faces around, so we'll use circles for that. And then we've got four growth levers, so we'll use rectangles for talking about growth levers. So let's get started with business functions. And as I mentioned, there are three main functions that exist in any business. They exist in commercial real estate businesses, but slightly differently. So I'll talk about that in just a moment, but let's first identify what these three functions are. The first function is the growth function. So the growth function is going out there, generating leads, prospecting, having conversations, and converting those opportunities into business. It's the sales function, and it's the lifeblood of any business. So sales is the first function of any business. Next up, we've got fulfillment. So once sales are made, the business has an obligation to fulfill on the promise of that sale, whether that be through the delivery of a service or the provision of some sort of a product. So we've got growth and we've got fulfillment. And lastly, we've got the operations function. Now, the operations function is not usually core to what the business does, but it's necessary so the business can do what it needs to do. So it's things like payroll to pay our staff, admin, support, IT to get the computers working. It might even be real estate, right? Because if your business is not core to real estate, you still need facilities to do business. So we've got growth, fulfillment, and operations that exist in all businesses. And if we think about what's going on in a commercial real estate agency team in sales and leasing, we've got the growth function and we've got the fulfillment function, but those two functions are often performed by the same person, which is different to what's going on in most other businesses. In most businesses, we've got salespeople doing the growth function, and then fulfillment, we've got client success, customer service, people working in factories building stuff, people, practitioners, logistics, whatever. But what do commercial real estate agents do? They list and sell. They list and sell, list and sell. And listing and selling is growth and fulfillment. We grow the business by winning listings, and then we fulfill on those listings by selling, or in the case of leasing the listings that we have on our books. And there's also a support function that exists in commercial real estate agency teams, and that includes database, paperwork, what else? Dealing with lawyers, making sure things are advertised online, all of this sort of stuff. And what's different inside a commercial real estate agency team is that a lot of commercial real estate agents are operating in all three of these areas. So rather than having some people who are doing listings, some people doing selling, and some people doing support, there's a lot of commercial real estate agents who are doing all of these things. And they're doing all of these things because it's always been done like that, or perhaps they don't want to share any of the commission with anyone else, or they believe that they're better off doing it themselves because no one can do a better job than them, or they don't know how to delegate, or maybe they don't have anyone to delegate to. So the opportunity that exists for leaders, for owners of businesses, is to make sure that our best performers are not operating support functions. Because if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. And what we want to do as commercial real estate professionals, leaders, as much as possible, is to be operating within our zone of genius. So our zone of genius is what we are good at, what we can get paid for, and what we enjoy doing. and what we can get paid for at a maximum amount. So if we're not operating within our zone of genius, then a business owner is overpaying for certain tasks to be done, or you are not actually operating at your full potential. And the way to prove this is through the rule of 2,000 hours. Does anyone know what 2,000 hours represents? It is 2,000 hours roughly in a work year. So 40 hours in a work week and 52 weeks in a year is 2,080 technically, but just for simplicity's sake, we'll say 2,000 because it's easy to calculate. And if we've got someone who's earning $200,000 a year, lucky them, but let's say we do, that person's effective hourly rate is $100 an hour. Now, if we've got that person who's got an effective hourly rate of $100 performing tasks that we could get someone else to do just as well or better than they're doing for $30 an hour, $40 an hour, a virtual assistant doing it for $10 an hour, then the business is overpaying for certain tasks. And that person is actually losing money because they're spending time operating outside of their zone of genius. So the opportunity, I think, is to make sure as much as possible people are operating within their zone of genius and that we've got people performing tasks of value that is as close as possible to their effective hourly rate. Does that make sense? Yeah, a few nods, all right. Let's talk about property management now, because in property management, we've got something different going on. Most property managers aren't doing all of the things. They're doing a lot of the things. But what I see in property management is that often the growth function is being neglected. So if we think about what is the growth function of property management, it's not to list, it's the business development function. And often within property management, business development occurs due to the efforts of the principal or because something that's going on in the sales and leasing team, there might be some mechanism to refer business to property management. So growth in property management is business development, which in my opinion in some businesses is being neglected. And if no one is responsible for this, then it's not going to get done to the extent to which it could. In property management, fulfillment is property management. And I watched an interview with Megan recently, and she gave a great definition of what property managers do, which is they administer the lease and they collect the rent. So that is the fulfillment of property management. We administer the lease and we collect the rent. And then there is an operations function that also occurs, which is admin, right? And we might have a team assistant, we might have assistant property managers, we might have a virtual assistant. And increasingly in property management, we've got the opportunity to outsource or maybe even automate some of these administrative functions. And if we turn this triangle upside down, we can create something that looks like a funnel. And what I want to suggest that we do when we look at this funnel is that we want to look for ways to elevate people's roles and increase the productive capacity of a business by looking at all the different functions that are performed and running them through this process. So the first thing that I'd recommend that we do with the functions that exist inside a business is we look for what we can eliminate. So there might be certain things that are being done inside a business that don't need to be done anymore. And that's the opportunity to eliminate them. It might be certain data that we're collecting. We just say we don't need to do that anymore, and we stop doing it. And that creates more capacity in the business. Now, if it's something that we need to do and we can't eliminate it, the next step is to say, can we automate it? Is this something that we can get somebody to stop doing because it can be done by technology or by a machine? And an example of that might be when rent falls due and it's overdue, we don't pick up the phone and call the tenant. Often there's an SMS or an email that goes out, and that's a form of automation that kicks in that was previously performed by a person. Now, if you can't eliminate or automate something, we might outsource it. And when we outsource things, we're getting someone external to the organization to perform that function for a lower cost better than we can do it internally. And the accounts function is one thing that's often outsourced within property management businesses. The next step is to delegate. And when we delegate tasks, what we're actually trying to do is to take it from one person and give it to somebody else who has a lower effective hourly rate. So therefore we reduce the cost to the business of performing that task. But the other thing that we do when we delegate work is we elevate people's roles. So if you start doing your boss's job, your role has been elevated. Or if you start delegating work, then you actually have more time and space to perhaps focus on strategic growth initiatives, or maybe to spend time in client-facing work. And the last thing, if we run things through this function funnel, and we can't do any of the other things that I've mentioned here, is, well, then we have to do it and continue doing it by the same person who's doing it. But we still look for an opportunity to improve that process. by efficiency gains and productivity improvements and the like. So there are still always opportunities for us to create more capacity in the business, for us to grow the business and to make it more profitable. And if you're wondering, well, there's 385 things going on inside my business, where do I start in terms of which functions to run through this funnel? The best place to look is things that take a lot of time, things that we do a lot of, and things that are repetitive. Because they're often the ones where there's an opportunity to automate, outsource, or perhaps delegate. So that is the function funnel, and that is business functions. What I want to do now is take a look at the way that teams are structured so they can perform those functions to a higher level. And if we take a look at the typical team structure that exists for property management, typically what we've got is, and I know not every business is structured quite like this, but this is common. We've got a head of property management or a senior property manager. We might have a property manager, we might have someone doing accounts, and then we've got an assistant property manager. For bigger teams, it might be structured something like this. We might have a senior property manager in there, maybe an assistant property manager and a team assistant or a virtual assistant. Now, if we want to have not just a common property management structure, but actually a growth-oriented property management structure, then we might just add in a business development manager. And that person is then responsible for the growth that occurs in the property management business. And I want to point out that you don't have to have a big business to have a business development manager. You can have a smaller business and still have a business development manager. Now, the question that most people have is, can I afford a business development manager? And they might say, I can't afford one, so therefore I'm not going to have one. And if that's you, then I'm going to, I guess, address that topic in a moment. But what I would say is that it is better to at least have somebody who is responsible for business development than just to not have that function exist inside the department. So in that case, we might want to allocate the responsibility of business development to the person within the team who has the greatest propensity to perform that function. That might be the head of property management, but it also could be somebody in the team who has, if you're right, the right disposition to take on some of that responsibility for growing the business. So I think as much as possible, we want to have the right people in the right seats. And I feel like in agency, in sales and leasing, in some high-performing agency teams that I've seen, that they have this kind of worked out, more so than smaller businesses. And there is this saying, which is find, mind, and grind. Has anyone heard of find, mind, and grind? No one. All right, well, I've got lots of new things to tell you today. Find, mind, and grind is a concept that exists in larger commercial real estate businesses. When I worked at CBRE, I can remember one of my colleagues telling me about it, and he told me about it like he'd thought of it. He didn't think of it, by the way. It's actually, if you're interested, I do have the book that it comes from, which is David Maister's Managing the Professional Services Firm. So that's where this concept comes from, if you are interested. But find, mind, and grind means that we organise a team based around what people are most productive and best at doing, based on their zone of genius, to maximise the incomes of the people inside the team and also the profitability of the business. So we've got the rainmakers who are there to find the business, right? They're out there generating leads, prospecting, pitching for business, and winning those mandates, winning those instructions for us to have listings. Then we have the minders. The minders are the people who are taking care of the listings once they're on our books. So they are canvassing for buyers, they're canvassing for tenants, they're fielding inquiry that's coming in. They're handling the inspections. They're often handling the negotiations on the contracts, on the leases, on the sales. And then also we might have what we call grinders. And the grinders are there to prepare the marketing, to make sure everything's online. They're coordinating the deal with external parties like lawyers, and they're handling the paperwork. So find, mind, and grind, I think, is a pretty neat concept that you can look to apply if you've got more than 2 or 3 people within your sales and leasing team. The concept works for property management. But given that find, mind, and grind belongs to our friend David Maister in that book, I thought I'd come up with a new title that we can use just for property managers. And I did some brainstorming, and the title I came up with is Hunt, Front, and Grunt. And I think this fits in better with property management. So we've got hunters who are business developers. And what they do is they're out there looking for new properties. They might be properties owned by people who we already have a relationship in our business, but we don't currently manage it. So, excuse me, we're looking for opportunities to get more properties into our rent roll. We might also have revenue streams that we're looking for. So what are some things, what are some value that we can deliver to the market that we're not currently delivering? Excuse me. We would then look, that's part of their purview, is new revenue streams. And finally, they're also responsible for new relationships. So it's their job to go out there and develop relationships with potential clients, but also with strategic partners and also people who can refer business into the property management team. So that's what the hunters do, the business developers. Then we've got the fronters, and that would be a lot of people in this room. They're the property managers who are managing a portfolio, who are fronting the business on behalf of the firm. So they're responsible for client communication, they're ensuring that operational excellence is being met, and they're also handling lease negotiations on rent reviews and renewals and the like. And then we've got some people doing the grunt work. They might be doing the non-client facing work that needs to be done, perhaps managing the tenants. That might be done by the fronters, but you might allocate that to the grunters. They're coordinating third parties and they're handling the paperwork. So hunt, front and grunt, I think, is a good concept for property managers for a few reasons, because it ensures that we've got people who are in charge of growing the business, but also it makes property management a department where more different types of people can excel. Because I think there's this idea that property managers are this type of person and sales and leasing people are this type of person. But if there are different roles and responsibilities that we think that exist within a department, then a department has the capacity to actually support the career aspirations of more types of people. So that's team structure. Let's move on now and talk about growth levers. And there are 4 ways to grow a commercial real estate business. Now you might think, well, hang on, there's more than 4 ways that I can grow a commercial real estate business, but when we boil it down and we look at the categories, which I'm going to talk through in a moment, there's only 4 ways. And I've gone through this exercise in different modalities where it's more of a workshop and people sing out all the different ways that they think they can grow a business. And typically, or not typically, always, they fall within these 4 buckets. I'm going to talk you through what the buckets are. If you can think of a way to grow a commercial real estate business that doesn't fall into one of these categories, please tell me, because I want to improve this presentation and correct myself if there is a way to grow it that doesn't fall into these categories. So the 4 ways to grow a commercial real estate business, the first way is through organic growth. So how do we activate organic growth? Well, we do more repeat business. We get more referrals. We generate more or better quality leads. We do more prospecting and we do it better. We engage in better sales conversations. We improve our conversion rate and we make more sales that way. We may also reverse fee compression. We may capture more of the growth that's going on in the market. On average, year on year, the market grows and we want to capture our fair share of that. If a business isn't growing, it's dying. And if we're not capturing at least the amount of market growth that's going on, we're actually shrinking in relative terms. So the job of organic growth is to capture more of the growth that is happening in the marketplace. We can also do this by promoting the business better or improving our branding. And the opportunity that I think exists within organic growth is to just make some marginal small improvements in a couple of areas, and then you start to get magnified or multiplied growth. So if we generate a few more leads that are better quality leads, and we convert them at a slightly higher rate, you start to get magnified growth that comes into the business. And that's what organic growth is. Organic growth is just about getting more juice from the same number of oranges, right? We're working with what we've got and we're doing slightly better. And I used to like operating in the organic growth space for a couple of reasons. One is because it's about your leadership. It's about improving people within the team. So creating a vision, having a culture where people can perform and creating the environment where people can be the best that they can be. But also organic growth, for those of you who don't like spending money, is free growth. Because unlike all the other ways that I'm going to talk about, you don't actually have to spend any money necessarily to activate the lever of organic growth. It's just doing more with what you've got. You can spend money to improve organic growth. You can invest in training. You can invest in new branding, for example. But there are other ways to activate organic growth that don't involve the spending of any money. Our next growth lever is mergers and acquisitions. So the most common M&A strategy or way to activate M&A in a commercial real estate business is buying a rent roll. Now you can also merge with other businesses or you might acquire another business, but the quickest and easiest way and the most common way is by buying a rent roll. And the most common mistake that I see when people buy a rent roll is that they don't get it valued, or if they sell a rent roll and they don't get it valued. So I want to implore you to make sure that if you're going to transact on a rent roll, whether you are buying or selling, to make sure that you get it valued. Because just because we see one rent roll transacted at, say, a 3-time multiple, it doesn't mean that another rent roll, which looks similar from a distance, is also worth 3 times. There can be different things going on inside that rent roll. There might be a high concentration of ownership amongst a certain landlord. There could be more vacancy. There could be lower average fees within the rent roll. There could be smaller properties that are returning less than $1,000 a year, which are marginally profitable. So we want to make sure that if we're going to transact on a rent roll, that we get it valued, or if we don't get it valued, that we really understand the transaction evidence and we do our due diligence. And while we may not be able to transact at the value that we believe is fair, if we can transact at what is a fair value for us to transact at, we've got the peace of mind to actually have made a good deal for us in that transaction. The third way to grow a commercial real estate business is recruitment. Okay, so we bring more people into the business. And there are 3 reasons why we recruit. One is because we want to bring in more people who are rainmakers. People come in and they can make an immediate impact on the business. The second reason why we want to recruit people is because they've got the potential to become rainmakers in the future. The third reason why we recruit people is because they support the efforts of our rainmakers. So they are the minders and the grinders who can create capacity for our finders to go out and do more, or the fronters and the grunters who can create capacity for our hunters to do more. And recruitment goes hand in hand with retention, because if we're great at recruitment but not at retention, it's like pouring water into a leaky bucket. And what I would say about recruitment is that a lot of business owners and leaders find it more difficult, say, than business development. But business development and recruitment are actually very similar skills. It's just that as business owners and leaders, we tend to spend more time developing business than we do on recruitment. I'm not discounting the fact I know it's been hard over the last few years, recruitment, getting a little bit easier this year. But I think the main reason why it's hard is because we don't spend as much time doing recruitment. So my message to you about recruitment is to spend more time on it. And the reason for that is it's a highly leveraged activity. If we spend our time winning new business, we obtain the business, we do the business, the transaction is done. If we spend our time on recruitment, we can bring someone in who can then get business for you, for the business, for as long as they stay in the business. So that's why it's a higher leveraged activity. The fourth and final way to grow a commercial real estate business is to enter new markets. And there are a few ways that we can enter new markets. We can move into a new sector. So we might move into office, industrial, or retail if we're not in those sectors. We might move into an emerging sector like childcare, for example. Or we might go deeper or into a different segment of a sector that we're already in. So we might be doing, let's say, retail strip center or strip shops, and we might start doing neighborhood centers, for example. So that's one way. We can go into sectors. We can also move into new geographies. We can open a new office. We can push out our patch wider and start operating in an area that we're not currently operating in. We can go for new client types. So sometimes we see businesses, particularly in Melbourne, opening up an Asia desk. And that's a way that we can target a client type with more precision. We also can go for higher asset values and lower asset values. And we can offer new services. That's another way to enter a new market. So we can start doing valuations or project management or something like that. So the last thing that I want to do as part of this presentation is to give you 4 specific ways that you can activate these growth levers that is going to help you grow your property management business. And the first way is through a collaboration incentive. So a collaboration incentive activates the levers of organic growth, and it also activates the lever of retention. And what we're doing here is we're offering an incentive to our non-property management staff to find property management opportunities and direct them to the property management team. Now you might say, well, that's their job anyway, but if we provide an incentive for them to do that, then it's more likely to happen. Particularly not just when a transaction occurs, but think about all the times that our sales and leasing people are talking to landlords and then there's no transaction, there's no opportunity, but there might be an opportunity for the property management business. And I think if we don't actually do a transaction with a landlord at the time, but we can incubate the client by introducing them to property management and actually them becoming a property management client, that's a better place for them to be than for them continuing to do property management business with another entity. And the question I think becomes, how do we incentivize this? What is the incentive that we provide to people outside of property management to introduce property management opportunities to that department. And I'm not going to stand here and prescribe the amount, but what I would say is think about the value that is created when you don't have to purchase a rent roll, when you actually get that for free or as a result of a referral. Not only the increase in enterprise value, but the downstream revenue that comes from future sales and leasing, and also the recurring revenue that we can get. Now, for people inside property management, how do they get rewarded? Well, what I would recommend is that we reward property managers to identify sales and leasing opportunities that are going on inside the portfolio as well. Because property managers are at the coalface speaking to landlords about what is going on within their portfolio, and they may see or hear something which suggests that the landlord is thinking of selling, that our sales and leasing team may not see, or they may see something which gives rise to them thinking that it would be appropriate for us to initiate a conversation about sales and leasing. So we want to empower our property managers to, one, initiate that conversation or refer that opportunity to sales and leasing, or to, and we want to make sure that they do that by them having an incentive to do it and not feeling like, oh, if I initiate this conversation, then my rent roll gets smaller because a sale might happen. We want to encourage people to identify what is the right opportunity for the business and also the right opportunity for the client. So that's collaboration incentive. Our next one is monetization of services. So this is a form of entering new markets. And what this is all about is starting to charge for services that we are not currently charging for, or that we are currently charging only a nominal fee. Because if it's not in the scope of agreement, if it's not in the property management contract, then we should be getting paid for it. And I think the common one that I see most often is the opinion of value for a self-managed super fund. And we provide this service for free, or we do it for very cheap. It takes up a lot of time. It delivers a lot of value, and we're not getting paid for it. Now, it's not just the opinion of value for a self-managed super fund. It can also be rent reviews. It can be lease renewals. It can be project managing small repairs, green lease initiatives, all this sort of stuff, right? And the mistake is that we say it doesn't take us much time, or we don't want to disrupt the relationship, so we'll just do it for free, and we'll do it for very little money, and everything will be good. But the problem with that is that if we don't get paid for it, then often we resent doing it. We don't do a very good job at it, even though the client still expects it to be done very well. And that can reflect poorly on us. And if we actually do a good job and we get paid for it, we can productize that and start selling that to other clients, and we can create a whole new revenue stream. So I invite you to have a think about the services that you're providing currently at no cost or low cost, and not think about how long it takes to perform those services. Think about the value that's being created for the client, and also the opportunity to provide that service to more clients that you have. The next strategy is an employee referral program. So the biggest handbrake on many businesses is the ability to find more people, good people to come and join the firm. And when we're trying to hire people, there's a few things that we can do. We can advertise online on Seek or Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever. We can get out there and talk to people in our network. We can work with a recruiter. But a way for us to, again, create more leverage is to activate the networks of our people, because all of the people in a business know people who potentially could become an employee in the firm. And nobody is a better evangelist to work for the team than somebody who's already working for the team, because they are actually already deciding out of their own free will to work in that business. And they're also, I think, inherently incentivized to make good referrals, because one, it reflects on them. If they refer in a dud, then that doesn't look too good. It doesn't reflect well on them. But also, they've got to continue working with this person. So surely they want to refer in good people, because they're going to be working with them at the end of the day. Now, if you're thinking, well, hang on, people might start referring in people just to get the incentive. There are ways to protect the business by only paying out the incentive after, say, 3-month probationary period is served, and then we can pay out the other 50% after 1 year. And that also acts as a retention mechanism, both for the new employee and the existing employee, because we only allow them to participate in the referral program if they remain an employee. So a few things that I would recommend for an employee referral program. One is that there is an incentive. I think we need to provide an incentive. Think about the level of incentive. Sometimes I see incentives which are a little bit low and stingy. I think if you think about what it costs in terms of spending time to employ someone, advertising, working with a recruiter, maybe we can redirect a bit of that money to our existing employees. And then the other issue is that we don't promote it. So we've got an employee referral program and then we don't talk about it. No one knows it exists. So when we actually do pay out an incentive to somebody, we've got to put it up in lights and really celebrate the fact that we've just handed a big check to somebody, and that will then send the signal that, oh, this is real, and we can get the opportunity to employ people, to refer people into the business. All right, I said I'd come back to this. The last strategy is a business development manager within our property management team. So the biggest obstacle, I think, to hiring a business development manager is the cost. So what would a business development manager cost? In the first year, we might say, exclusive of incentives, because this would be an incentivized position, but it's probably less incentivized than, say, a sales or leasing person. Let's say 100 grand, because it's a nice round number. So if we're paying out a total cost of $100,000 for a business development manager in the first year, let's compare what else we could get for $100,000. If we assume a multiple on a rent roll of 3 times, we could get $33,000 of recurring income if we bought a rent roll for $100,000, right? Because that's 3 times the multiple. So if we hired a business development manager and in their first year they did $33,000 worth of recurring revenue, I think we'd probably be a little bit disappointed with that result, right? We'd hope that they would do more, but it would be the same. And if we think about what does that mean in terms of what they've done, well, assuming that each property is worth maybe $3,000 in annual revenue, that's 11 properties. So we would be having that person find 1 new client each month after warming up for the first month. But I think they can do better than that. Let's say that our business development manager could actually bring in $100,000 in their first year. If they did that, we probably wouldn't pay an incentive because they've just covered their costs. But there is this huge creation of enterprise value, right? Because there's a 3-time multiple on the value of that recurring revenue. There's downstream revenue that comes from sales and leasing. And also we are having recurring revenue inside the business. So a business development manager, if we think about $100,000, you might say, well, hang on, still, what if it doesn't work out? I'm in the hole $100,000. Well, I'd say, no, you're not, because you're only in the hole $100,000 if you let it run for a whole year without deciding that it's not working. If it's not working after 3 or 4 months, you can have a difficult conversation that results in that person moving on. And at that point, you still retain any value they've created in the time that they've been in the business. And yes, you've also learnt an expensive but important lesson about the type of person who is right for your business from a business development manager perspective. So, a quick recap of what we've talked about today. I've covered business functions. Business functions are growth, fulfillment, and operations. We talked about that in terms of a sales and leasing team, which is to list, sell, and to support. And also in terms of a property management team, which was business development, property management, and also admin. And we looked at the function funnel, where we talked about what are the different tasks that we can look to create more efficiency in by either eliminating them, automating them, outsourcing them, delegating them, or doing them. We then got into team structure, which was mainly about find, mind, and grind, or hunt, front, and grunt. And then we talked about our growth levers, and the growth levers that we identified were organic growth, mergers and acquisitions, recruitment, and entering new markets. And we did all of that with shapes as well, although I didn't spend much time talking about the shapes, but you probably noticed them on the screen. In your tote bag, I've got a feedback form. I haven't delivered this content before talking about property management, so I'd really love to hear your feedback on how it was for you. It will help me deliver better content in the future. There's also a free resource for leaders about growing a commercial real estate business, and also for everyone who wants to use artificial intelligence to create more efficiency. There's a ChatGPT guide, the exact prompts you type into ChatGPT to make it perform sales, marketing, and administration tasks for you. I want to say thank you to Megan for inviting me today. I'm really honoured to have had the opportunity to speak, so thank you so much, Megan, for putting your trust in me to be your first speaker. I know we're going to have Q&A. You can take a photo of this QR code and that will send me an email. If there's something that you want to ask me that you don't get the opportunity to do today, or you want to have a private conversation, that's the way to do it. Andy, I think we're going to do some Q&A.